or my audio, can you chime in? Let me know.
Definitely.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Since you were the first one here. And let's see, recording has started. So this is really cool. All right. So what we're going to do is that I wanted to just tell some stories and kind of go through a number of different topics with you. And I thought the best way to probably do this would be to kind of draw it out. And when we did some of the sessions that we did previously, is that we did a lot of whiteboarding. And we had Craig was in here and he was whiteboarding. And I remember Amber back in the day. But it's just really good to tell a story as you're kind of drawing it out and making things visual. And so I'm going to do a little bit of that today. But I thought that like the topic, since this is more of a refresh than it is just like, brand new to integration, is I'm going to tell the same stories, but I'm just going to turn them just a little bit. Because when we talk about integration 101 is one of the topics, one of the bullet points here, and the history of integration, cloud computing, multi-cloud environments, it's still relevant to know this history and to know why systems were architected the way that they were and how much of that architecture still remains today in the conversations that we're having with our prospects and with our customers about, taking down these monolith systems and these monolith architectures and breaking down the silos, smashing those silos and introducing, cloud native technology. And so that's kind of the story that I'm going to try to tell, since we do have such a varied audience on the phone here, is I wanted to just start with, a little bit of the history of integration. And so when we talk about the history of integration, I'm going to start by talking about something that goes the whole way back to is mainframe technology and how mainframe technology formed, the software AG basically in the 60s through the 70s, 80s, and so forth, is that the way that organizations utilized mainframe computers and how mainframe computing utilized integration and how some of these concepts that originated with these technologies still exist today. Okay. So without going like super, super, super deep, because there are dozens and dozens of examples that we could use here. This part of it is that these hosts that were implemented and are still running today, there are massive amounts of computations that happen on these. And so what I wanted to do is to show an example of being able to share data. Hopefully you can read this. It might be a little bit small, sorry about that. Share data, make data more open, and make data more valuable. And so what system architects were able to do is that, and I'm just going to give you two examples, there could probably be quite a few more, is that mainframe data could be written into data stores. And I'm going to use the term data stores because, use your imagination, it could be dozens of different types of data stores, databases and data lakes and different things along those lines, okay? Data warehouses and such, but we're just going to use this example. Or data could be written into a file system. And this concept is interesting to kind of talk about because the example that I'm going to use, base definition is just batch integration. And batch integration is something that is a concept that we still talk about today. And so to take this timeline and think about this type of integration is that a mainframe would have some type of routine or some type of program or some type of scheduler that would take a certain amount of data, and let's just for the sake of this example, all of the invoices that were paid today at 11:59 p.m., it writes them into a single file, single CSV file, could be thousands of rows, or it could be thousands of CSVs, and they're going to write those into a file system. Or an example could be is that they would write this data into a database or into a data store. It could happen once a day, it could happen once an hour, but the example of this being batch processing, or let's use the term batch integration here for the first time. And so on these mainframe hosts, there could be hundreds of these routines that is basically just writing data all over the enterprise. Okay. And so now let's go ahead and think about applications or systems, other systems. And these could be mid-range hosts or these could be distributed. And let's just say that there could be, a Java application. There could be, other business apps, or there could be Microsoft developed applications, is that these Java apps need to share data, consume data out of the store. We could have a business app that also needs to pull these CSV files into their systems to be able to get access to that data. Or maybe this example of this Microsoft app is going to go ahead and connect directly to, for an example, a Microsoft database. This example of batch integration is shown here. These are integration points. And so the reason I'm showing this first is that there are so many businesses that are still getting an investment or tremendous value out of these types of hosts. And this type of integration exists. And it exists because it works. And it exists because the business can be profitable. The business can operate and be functional with this type of integration. Okay, and we see it today. And the thing that I always like to ask, and I think that I've talked to the folks that are on the call at various times, to be able to say, what are your integration challenges today? Can we talk about the integration architecture today? And so even going back to this example, is that these are highly functional types of integrations. Okay, but think about the batch integration and think about what happens with that batch integration and think about what needs to happen to be able to update this type of integration. Okay, one example, just to be able to kind of take you through the timeline. Okay, secondly, we're going to shift gears here just a little bit, but we're going to tell a similar story. Is that as architecture and systems matured, is that these organizations to share data and have that data even be more valuable by approaching more real-time sharing of data. And so what I'm going to do now is fast forward, into more recent times, and I'm going to introduce a topic that we can discuss. Is that we're going to call this messaging oriented middleware. Okay. Terminology, for the sake of this training, is it's important to just understand and just let this replay, in your head a couple times. I still use this terminology. If I'm talking to, folks, let's just say that demographically are like me, it's okay. We don't use this type of terminology because what it does and how it dates us. But I'm introducing, going from batch computing into a messaging oriented architecture. Okay. And the example here, or the acronym, is just MOM. Okay. And so again, whether, an organization would have, a mainframe system still, there could be other mid-range computers, there could be distributed computers that are, or systems that are out there, is that the integration still needs to happen because the data still needs to be open. It needs to still be shareable. There still needs to be value associated with that data, but now it needs to be closer to real time. And this one's the key. I say closer to real time, right? We're not talking about instantaneous transactions, just introducing a different paradigm here. Whereas we have applications that need to share data with other applications. And so what this example did is that, application 1, application 2, application 3, is that introduced software that basically sits in the middle. And this is the messaging oriented middleware. And so the term, when we talk about messaging, this was this step where the application itself, whether upstream or downstream, whether they be Java, Microsoft, SAP, whatever, probably doesn't really matter, is that they had the technology embedded, is that they could share messages, small messages of information, as opposed to pooling information out of a batch file. Pulling information out of a database is that it introduced the way to be able to just share very, very small, very, very fast messages. And so this example is that you probably heard of this before, is it introduced a paradigm which was called publish and subscribe. And this publish and subscribe approach would allow organizations to create topics at the very highest level. There's a lot of information that can be associated with this, and queues. And so we would know that we want to subscribe to a certain topic and queue, okay? And so think about this approach. What this did is it allowed application one to know that there is, and when information is updated in a particular topic or a particular queue, send me that message. Send the message to application 2, 3, and so forth. And so what this did is this approach the ability to be able to communicate in real time. But if you look at this picture, again, if you can see this, hopefully everybody can see this well enough, is that these are your integration points. And so you had to maintain the messaging communication, what I want to publish, what I want to subscribe in each one of these locations. It solved a problem, but it still introduces integration maintenance that can be streamlined. Okay. And so organizations that have adopted this type of technology, and so if we want to call this the messaging bus, right, these technologies are still in play today because organizations that have architected this across their entire enterprise to be able to unravel this or unspin this architecture into a new architecture could be very, very costly. But organizations are looking to do it. So that's one example, right? And we're gonna fast forward this timeline just a little bit more. Okay. Similar approach, and this is where we start to talk about the technology that's the foundation of software AG, the most important technology in the entire company, which is webmap. And so now, again, there could be a couple steps, that we're skipping over, but I think for the sake of the conversation, if anybody can guess, what we're going to introduce now is service-oriented architecture. Make sure I'm spelling everything right. You guys probably can't read this anyway, but that's okay. SOA. Okay, SOA. And so a very, very similar approach in a sense, whereas we had, applications A, B, and C, and other applications one, 2, and 3, is that we introduced technology that would also sit in the middle. And this technology would enable an even more efficient integration paradigm or integration approach. And so the service component would basically sit in the services, what would sit into what was referred to affectionately as an enterprise service bus. In the previous example, it was a message bus, but what we've done now in this example is started to introduce the ability to create connections to packaged applications. And I'm going to say SAP for an example. These could be Java applications. These could be Microsoft applications. This approach is these are referred to as adapters. And I think in today's technology, we're referring to them as connectors. Same approach, same idea, is that what we did here is we could create services and create these services interfaces that applications would be able to connect to and to be able to consume data, okay? And what this did is it created services, which are this example. Give customer A or application A, you can think of it either way. I need to go to SAP, I need to get data, I need to filter that data, I need to validate it against the Java application, and then I need to send a message back, which, acknowledged that transaction, okay? And so the enterprise service bus, by creating those services, is it used standards, the way the communication standards, the way the data was presented, standards, the way that the data was returned using standards. And so what that did is that introduced reusability. And it introduced portability as well. Okay. And so this approach, for the sake of this conversation, the simplification now is that the integrations, remember on the mainframe, you had a lot of places where the integrations need to be maintained. The messaging-oriented middleware, a little bit different. And then as we get to this approach, we can see that the integration just maintained here. And so we've eliminated some of the complexity. We've eliminated the overhead. And then what we've done is we've made these solutions portable. And so that if a new application is brought into the mix or stood up in that organization, is that now they can have access directly to this interface because we're using a standards approach. And so the amount of time that it would take for that application to be productive is reduced dramatically. And so the performance of this solution is incredibly fast. And bringing up new interfaces or new services and making these transactions and making it portable, in a sense that if I wanted to bring up a whole nother environment in Europe or a whole nother environment in a different location or if a different data center, is that the portability of those services is contained in the enterprise service bus. So this architecture approach, this service-oriented architecture in a lot of our customers and in a lot of our prospects is somewhat prevalent, somewhat, because in order to make this work is that this technology needed to be implemented. Organizations could have taken a service-oriented approach and done it without an ESB because, for the folks that are some of the senior folks that are here, is that you could implement this type of architecture without this. You could do it. But what this did is it made it much, much, much efficient. Okay. Let's go ahead and do a couple more. Let's just do one more step in our timeline here. Okay. Let's just fast forward for the most part to the present. Okay. And so now what we're gonna describe is going to just throw some terms out here. Is that we can say cloud native integration. I think we're using this terminology, right? I think so. We're using integration platform as a service. We're using that every day. And then lastly, we are going to introduce API driven integration. I'm intentionally gonna stay away from this one. It's important for the overall story, but we're going to spend a whole 2 hours on discussing this. Okay. But if we think, and this is going to transition us into the next topic, is that the way that we can position this is that we're going to think of our clouds. Okay. And we're going to think of are on premises. And this is really bad, but that's what those are. These are the on-premise examples, okay? And so if we break it down, and we'll cover this in our next topic, is that if we break this down to SaaS applications, and hopefully I don't need to list out these examples, all right? Salesforce, ServiceNow, I do the same thing every time, Workday. And then think of applications that are going to run in our cloud platforms. And again, just for the sake of this, I'm going to put AWS at top. I'm going to put Google here in the middle, and then I'm going to put Microsoft at the bottom. This one should probably be at the top, but whatever. You get the idea. Okay, is that organizations are going to be running their applications in these platforms, and they need to synchronize data with these type of applications. It's that they've migrated applications into AWS, and they need to make a connection to Salesforce. And that data needs to be synchronized with, let's just say it needs to be synchronized with ServiceNow, which would be weird, but it happens. And let's say we need to get Workday information into an application that's running in Google. And so this example, what we do is to introduce iPaaS. Okay. And so these two examples, what we're going to do is talk about hybrid connectivity. And it's interesting to think about hybrid connectivity, because the definition is it's a thing that's made up of two different elements. It's just hybrid, which is interesting, because if you think of the example, what we think of, which we might need to tweak a little bit in our understanding, is that would mean that the two different elements would be, just for the sake of this conversation, WMIO, hybrid, right? And the on-premises component would be web methods on-premise. Okay? This is the traditional example of hybrid. But what we're seeing today, or what we should be thinking about, is that, is to take that, and we have to be careful with the terminology, is to think that it could be multi-cloud solution. It could be, deploy, cook once and deploy many, many, many different ways. The example of, could we have web methods running in Google? Yeah, sure. Could we have the iPaaS running in Microsoft? Sure. Could we have integration server, trading networks, and universal messaging running in Microsoft Azure? Sure. Could we still have web methods running in a private data center that's maintained by our customers? Absolutely.
Hey, Mike.
Right. Yes, sir.
Hey, right where those two triangles are at the bottom of the screen, that's about as far as I guess I can see, probably the rest of us.
For that.
So below that, we can't
Appreciate
see.
that. Thank you, man.
Yep.
Thanks, Travis. Thank you, buddy.
Gotcha.
So let's do this. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, we'll just do this. I think you get the story here, right? This is something that it's just based on the terminology, and then the integration and synchronization is going to happen, and the integration is going to be deployed where it's the most efficient. Integration, truly on premise, in the customer's data center. Okay, integration deployed with their applications in AWS, GCP, or Microsoft, right? Deployed in their applications. WMIO stood up and being kind of that, that citizen development type platform, synchronizing data that's in the cloud, bringing up new connections, bringing up new workflows and making them incredibly fast and incredibly productive, and being able to share and continue to realize the investment of those systems that are sitting in the data center.
Hey, Mike.
And so yes, Kelly.
Sorry, apologies. How do you want to handle questions? Do you want to wait until the end, or do you want folks to kind of pipe in when they have one?
If you guys would like to pipe in when you have them, I think that would be fine.
Okay, because Carrie
Sure.
Roberts has a question.
Hey, Carrie.
I know that's a shocker, right? I just had a quick question. So I've had several conversations with people from an IoT standpoint where company may be large and they have several different deployment models, right? They may use AWS and Azure in two different divisions. But for IoT, it might be cross-divisional applications. So how does that work when it comes to integration? Is that considered a hybrid deployment at that point?
And for in the sake of this conversation, Carrie, it would be, right? Because we don't know, specifically where the technology is going to be implemented or what the technology or the integration requirements could be, all right? Because that's typically in most instances is that when we really start to dig into, our customers and we're doing the right type of discovery, that's when we determine that we can't do it with just the cloud. And I think that happens with our other products as well. I think it
Got
does,
it.
the other
Thank you.
business units, right? Because you dig into it, Carrie, you're going to learn. Because I think there's a strategy that we have, Sam does it, Travis, I've seen you do it, and I think everybody kind of does this, is that you lead your conversations and you lead your sales conversations with the easy stuff. And I don't mean easy because we're cutting corners. I'm talking about the way that we demonstrate, the way that we show our interface. Look how fast, look how productive you could be, look how easy it is. And then you start to work into, conversations, at the correct pace where you start to potentially talk about what would need to be implemented on premise. And the technology that's implemented on premise is going to produce and do the real heavy lifting, right? IoT, Cumulocity, Eris Alphabet, Web Methods. It's basically the same. Okay. So that kind of takes the history, which I wanted to do, which I don't know, 15, 20 minutes to talk about the history of integration. There's some holes probably that you could insert, certain things, but just to kind of paint a picture is that when we're talking to our prospects and talking to our customers, they could still have any of those type of architectures deployed. And so when we get into conversations, then we can determine timelines, we can determine compelling events, we can determine, and I think Danny is one thing that we had talked about, is that implementation deadlines. When do you have to get off that mainframe? When do you have to get out of that data center? When is something end of life? Is understanding those events within a timeline, will help us, move things faster. So, all right. Okay. This might be a little bit too elementary, but I think what we did back in January was we talked about I'm sorry that I'm going to use the 101 thing. It's just basically all I could think of. Is the architects in the field, and I think a lot of the sellers too, is that understanding, and that is a you, is that understanding, the hyperscalers and understanding these public clouds and getting a really strong technical foundation of how these solutions are put together in these. And so the architects like Eden is certified, is a Microsoft Azure certified architect. Went through tremendous amount of training, is certified, and she's certified in architect and she's certified in administration, I believe. 2 certifications in Microsoft. And she's certified as an AWS solution architect as well. And why is that important? Because she loves to learn. That's number one. But number two, in order for us and on the pre-sales team to be able to talk about the value in the ease of helping organizations migrate functionality into the cloud, is we have to know what the heck is happening in those different platforms. Okay. And so the example that I always use is understanding that there are similarities. That's probably not the right acronym, but you get to Microsoft. Is that within these platforms is that there are similarities. Okay. And again, probably way too elementary, but infrastructure as a service. And then on
Just
top of that,
just a heads up, Mike. We can't see the top half above AWS.
okay. I don't know what the hell's going on. Raphael, how about that? Did that help?
Now we can't see anything.
How about that?
Yep, now we can see it all.
Okay, thank you, man.
No
I don't know
problem.
what the heck's going on. Okay, anyway, platform as a service. And I think we could probably guess what the last one is, right? I know you're all saying it at home, okay? And so services that make up these different categories are a little bit different for these vendors, right? But again, I'm just going to keep it really, really simple, is that you've got compute, you've got data, you've got analysis, administration, and then ... Okay. And so these examples of our solution, Web Methods, running in AWS, installed on a compute node, utilizing a data service, utilizing some of the analysis tooling that AWS or the others provide, and then of course the administration components that are necessary. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that, you know, this is example 1, 2, 3, 4, is that AWS has over 250 services that you can take advantage of. Maybe somebody can correct me there, but I'd say it's upwards of that, and then so forth across the line, okay? And what we need to be able to do is that when our customers are evaluating our technology, is that we have to be able to assist them in implementing the technology in these environments, okay? And so if they are installing our software in these environments, our customers are. And it doesn't matter what the technology is. We're talking about Web Methods today, okay? And so again, is to think about integration server and the components that sit in integration server installed in a compute node connected to a data service and being functional. Trading networks, universal messaging, cloud streams, etc. I'm throwing some product names out there, which I think a lot of you folks have heard, okay? But this is where, introducing the terminology of on-premises, that's what the terminology that we're using still for that technology is. And I think sometimes we have to, think about, those type of conversations. And because if this is implemented in AWS, our customers are hosting it in AWS, all right? And so we use the term on-premise. I think it's correct for the most part, but when we're talking to our customers, I think it's just the flexible nature of integration and being able to introduce these approaches and these paradigms. I think that this is incredibly important, as this sits and how this is implemented. Okay. And so, when it's good to know and understand the differences. I think the reason that we're seeing so much, at least maybe our team is from the corporate side, and maybe it's different on the other teams, is that organizations like Software AG, particularly today, as opposed to 6 weeks ago, is that we're moving so much of our computing infrastructure or computing systems into the cloud, and particularly into Microsoft Azure, because of our re-architecting and replatforming our company, is that we have migrated in an accelerated manner into the cloud, right? And I think a lot of organizations that are utilizing Microsoft platforms and are utilizing Microsoft business applications and Microsoft, operating systems and so forth, is that's why we're seeing so much being pushed up into Microsoft from the business application standpoint. And there are, certain aspects of why organizations would want to run business application from a performance perspective in Google. There are certain use cases that are out there when it comes to massively parallel, billions of transactions, per minute type applications could potentially fare better in Google. Different use cases, technical reasons why they would. Okay. And so these examples of understanding, these compute platforms or hyperscalers as they're referred to, is to understand how we would run our software in these platforms and how it's similar and how customers have been doing this for years. There's an example that we have that we're working right now, current quarter opportunity, where we just helped the customer install our integration server, and we're going to do trading networks in their not brand new, but into their virtual private cloud in AWS. Okay. So let's shift gears one more time. Let's shift gears just one more time. Okay. Raphael, can you see that?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks, man. I'm keeping him. Sorry about keeping you on your toes there.
No, you're fine. The last one was perfect. So yeah,
All right,
that was
cool.
good.
All right, so okay, so now we're going to think about a couple different examples, okay, and we're going to introduce something here, which we see from time to time, which we're going to refer to as a private cloud. And I'm going to use this one as AWS, applications that are running in AWS. We're going to introduce our mighty webmethods.io. And then let's say that there are Microsoft applications that are running here. Okay, so organizations have implemented technologies that will introduce infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service that they can run in a private data center. And so technologies by Red Hat and IBM and Oracle, there's tons of organizations that provide this technology. And so from a private standpoint, there's advantages that organizations would have when it comes to control and when it comes to cost that's associated with, instead of adopting and paying AWS or paying Microsoft, is they may choose with their use cases to implement this type of technology that would provide the same type of services and the same type of ability to provision, new technology when required in a private manner as opposed to a public manner. And so what this does is, again, introduces an integration challenge. Because if they didn't have or utilize, if they didn't utilize an integration offering, again, the integrations and sharing data with their applications, they would have to maintain in this manner. And of course, there could be dozens, okay? There could be dozens. And so even they have adopted the cloud, they've adopted public cloud, and they've moved some of their Microsoft applications into the Microsoft Azure. They've utilized some AWS services or built applications in AWS where necessary. And then they've implemented their private cloud because of data security and the hardening of their architecture because of their processing financial data, right? And so what this does, again, is you've introduced integration challenges. Just because that they've, that they have to maintain these integrations. Right. And so even when you see these multi-clouds or like environments when we're doing discovery and we're asking questions to our, to our prospects and to our customers, is that you listen for this, and then you'll kind of get an idea of the best approach to take. And I think that what we're going to see a demo here. We're going to talk about the technology here in just a little bit, but introducing this concept is, I would say, the majority of the folks that we talk to know that this type of technology exists. Think about the folks that we talk to, okay? They understand that this technology exists. Whether they're actively looking for it, whether they're in an evaluation process, whether they talk to Forrester, talk to Gartner, they know it exists. But it's up to us, again, and I see us collectively as the, the opportunity teams, or on enterprise, the account teams, is to be able to know, the best way to introduce this technology to solve a very, very, very challenging problem. And to be able to do it efficiently, and to be able to do it, quickly, and to be able to, give the appearance that development, implementation, supporting, the migrations is going to be, very streamlined, right, and very straightforward. And an example, we've got an active sales opportunity, we do, on the corporate team, that is incredibly complex right now. Incredibly complex with the questions that we're answering and the scenarios that have been presented to us, and predictions of timelines and predictions of cost associated with migrating if they deploy one way or versus another. But it started with a simple conversation of, let us show you how easy you can get started with this technology. And I believe that that's going to happen with Alphabet Fastlane. It's going to happen with Cumulosity. It's going to happen with WebMethods.io. And then as we understand that they are running in these particular clouds, and understand the cost associated with these, then we can make sure that we introduce something that's incredibly compelling. And this is something that I think every day, I mean, even at Software AG, before the incident, is that we had some of these type of challenges, and we're using our own technology. Is that we have data centers here in Reston. We have in Fairfax. I don't know if it's still standing up. Data centers all over the world, and we're using our own product. And we're using Microsoft today more, even though we were previously. And we have some applications that are running in AWS, and we have a lot of SaaS applications as well, which I should probably put in the mix here. And I think the sellers and the the folks that are on the call, I mean, you're using a lot of these applications. And so think about that data that's being integrated, and think about opportunities for even, more streamlined integration at this point. Okay. I'm going to pause here for just a sec. Okay. So I'm going to transition here into talking about the technology. And so if you guys want to get a cup of coffee, go for it. And I'll go from the whiteboard over to my computer here in just a few minutes.
That one fit perfectly too, Mike.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so it's kind of mimicking what I'm gonna go through in the PowerPoint, but thinking about application to application integration, B2B. And let's say that there are now opportunities to introduce API management, is that the benefit, I believe, or I should say, my point of view is that a very solid benefit statement is that we've got a very tightly integrated, very easy to administer, and very easy to implement complete integration solution, okay? And so thinking about it this way is that if we talk about application to application integration, just in, just picturing it, or on your whiteboard at home, writing it out, think about all of the different options that we could introduce to, and the flexible options is at the right time to be able to introduce when it comes to application integration. At the very, very highest level, doing a simple synchronization of data between Salesforce and ServiceNow using webmethods.io. Being able to extract data from a particular routine and send, SMS messages or text messages using Twilio at the very, very highest level, the whole way down to, implementing massively, highly transactional services to like SAP or banking systems or, or other applications falls within this pillar, the whole way from webmethods.io down to integration server. And so, introducing web methods at this point, again, at the correct time and at the correct pace. I know some of us that are on the call is that we want to have a really, really good understanding of what the product set would be at the beginning of our engagements, when we're doing discovery. But the folks that are on here that are leading some of these more complex integration sales cycles or opportunities is a lot of time the products. Sometimes we use bill of material. I think that's an old school word, product list, whatever it might be, is that it doesn't surface until you really start to understand what that use case is, right? Use case, technical challenge, problem statement, are really, they're inclusive terminology, but there's going to be a difference between what is your integration use case and what is your integration challenge. Two different things. What they want you to demonstrate and what they're looking for technology-wise is one thing, but understanding that pain point to know how to introduce a technology, when to do it, I think is really, really good strategy to think about. Secondly, we have a session set up for B2B that we're going to deep dive into, and I think this is always the one where we have the most opportunity to learn, because the B2B, again, is organizations that, or companies, have been doing B2B since the inception of commerce, if you really think about it. And technology, that's been able to mature as time has progressed, has made this, the process of exchanging information from business to business, business to customer, whatever, all of those crazy acronyms, is also, we would take the same approach. We would take the same approach where we would, start by introducing or demonstrating our WMIO B2B technology in the cloud. Very, very, very progressive interfaces, very easy to develop, 3 clicks to onboarding a partner. Is start those conversations and start, not potentially with the easiest stuff, but be able to show that realm of possibility. And of course, as we collectively, as the opportunity team, start to do more discovery, understand the challenges, understand, what it would take to migrate, some of these really, really complex architectures that have been there forever, we might move down into conversations about what needs to exist as a hosted technology, or again, on-premise technology with trading networks and other components. Okay, and it's the same story with our API gateway and API portal. A little bit different, but showing the API portal in the cloud and demonstrating the ease of administration, the ease of setup, the ease of getting started, and then being able to work our way down where we're talking about, really hard problems to solve that's going to require our technology to be implemented on premise, right? And then for our customers to be able to know that this is all in one cloud per se, and to be able to administer and monitor in a common plane across all of these applications, billing across all of these applications, integration with a customer's billing system in one application, and being able to monitor it from a financial standpoint in one. It's pretty good messaging. And so I think that it's an easy conversation to have if you can tell the whole story, and if you have the opportunity to tell the whole story at the correct times. All right. Okay. So give me just a few minutes here. I'm going to shift gears and turn this off. Okay. And just give me a few seconds here. And I guess I'll just ask if you can hear me. Raphael, can you hear me?
We can
hear you.
All right, cool. All right, give me a sec. We can delete this part of the video. Okay. Sorry about the delay, folks.